Hello, welcome back to All for United WFC. Happy New Year to all of you watching. Is it too late to say Happy New Year? When's the cut-off when you can stop saying Happy New Year? Who knows? Anyway, you'll notice there is only two of us. Tash is on her way. She'll be with us in about 5, 10, 15 minutes. We'll see, but at latest 15 minutes. But she is joining us to offer the West Brom perspective. Really excited to have her on. So we'll see her in just a second, but she did say to get started. Hence, you've got me and Keris at the moment. It's starting 15:15. Not quite, Michael. It doesn't take that long at the moment, although it is very long at the moment, as you probably would know. So it does take a lot longer. So hello to everyone in the chat. Get your comments and your thoughts in and everything else. Keris, thanks for coming back on. How are you doing? What was the last show you were on? What was it? The Christmas special, wasn't it? And you had to dart
Christmas special, because I had to run and get my train. And shout out to my Uber driver who got me to the station, because I put my suitcase in the boot of his Uber, and he could see I was a bit flustered. And he was like, "Oh, are you running late for your train?" I was like, "Yeah, a little bit." And he risked both our lives to get me there on time. So well done to him, because I did make my train. But yeah, that was the last time I was on. I've had a very nice Christmas, although it's been very weird not having women's football. So had to watch the men, which has been mixed. But, we're back.
Up and down, isn't it? Up and down.
Yeah, really, really weird. I mean, there's enough channels talking about that. We don't need to add our 2 pence onto that. But it'll be nice to have the women's team back.
No, for sure. It's definitely nice to be talking about again. A game that we should probably comfortably win as well. I said to someone yesterday, this is a nice game to come back to. We're obviously going to talk about lads, Watson, Simpson, Clinton. There's obviously a lot of news that's come out, and Lucy Newell's news to come out in the next 24 hours as well, because that is coming in the next 24 hours. You're wondering, as we tweeted earlier on, we'd expect that announced as well. So there's a few loans and a departure to talk about, and a contract that is mixed emotions. I've been intrigued to read the replies to that. So we're going to get into all of that kind of a bit later on. You notice I'm stalling a little bit because I said we're waiting for Tash and we don't want to get into all of that just yet. But what I will just we'll start with the Clinton one actually then, Keris, before we get onto West Brom when Tash joins. But as I said, mixed reaction, I feel like, because it is a new contract in terms of what I believe is that there's probably additional money to her. I would imagine her wage has gone up, albeit it is another option. It's the option triggered for a year. I would imagine there's something in there that she doesn't remain on her current pay because she signed that a few years ago. I'm assuming you're happy with that, but obviously the backlash has been that it's not a long-term one yet, and there's obviously concern that she's not signed one yet, and that's why they've done this.
Yeah, I mean, that will be why they've done it. But as far as I'm aware, signing a contract, triggering an option to extend for a year, I don't think it weakens our hand in negotiations in any way. If anything, it's just buying a little bit of time. So I think that for me, I'm not overly concerned yet. If we had heard nothing, then I would be concerned. But I think from her perspective, it makes a lot of sense to trigger the option, because obviously her England career is progressing at a rate of knots. She's almost certainly I would be incredibly surprised if she's not in the Euro squad. She's making a case for a starting place. So it makes complete sense to me that she would want to just bide her time a little bit and just see how this season and next season go at United before she makes a decision about her long-term future. And obviously the money will be a factor as well. If you think about when she signed whatever contract she's on now, her value is going to have increased massively since she signed that contract. So it's not surprising at all. It's just that hope that it buys us time, which we use to negotiate a long-term deal, rather than, as Sporty's saying in the chat, extending the contract and then nothing comes of the extension. But yeah, I'm not overly concerned yet. I am being optimistic and seeing it as us just buying a little bit of time, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of uncertainty, obviously, around the manager at the moment. She's probably going to want that clarified before she signs anything longer term. As I put on my tweet, I'm not worried. I know there's talk about Jade as well, and Millie and other players that are out of contract at the end of the season as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show when we talk about a few of those things, because we've obviously mentioned before with Lad and everything else departing as well. But Tash has joined us. She's it looks like I'm I'm just going to bring her in so you can see what I'm talking about. Evening, Tash. Hope you are doing well. Are you still in the car? What's going on here?
Well, we've got training. So I'm just sat in the car. I've just pulled up, so I thought I'll grace my presence in the car, not in there, because they'll probably interrupt.
That is full on commitment.
That's commitment. We really appreciate that.
I'll just come to you first, and just I guess to introduce yourself to people who maybe aren't aware of why we've got you on, obviously this particular show, and if you just want to introduce yourself in terms of your route into women's football and what you're currently doing and everything there.
Yeah. So obviously I've played for many years. I won't give away my age, but I've played for a long time. So I played for Stoke for just under 10 years. Sort of moved to Albion for the latter sort of stages of any sort of football career that I did have. And I think for me, from there, I always knew that I wanted to get into the coaching side of things, management, player care, all that kind of thing. So it was during COVID that I sort of decided that actually I'm not as committed as I need to be a footballer. So I'm going to go down a different route. I love football and I love everything about it. So for me, the coaching side, the player care side of things is where I'm at now. So it's a really, really important thing for me now. So, you know, every bit of experience that I've had, I can bring into sort of, you know, helping the team that I'm currently with and wherever the future, you know, may be for myself. I'm excited for. So, yeah, that's a bit of background of me and my sort of football journey, I guess.
No, absolutely. And if you're not already, make sure you're following Tash as well, because we tagged her Twitter earlier on as well. There's obviously a lot of important causes that you promote and help to speak about as well. And as David knew, I was saying in the chat here, you know, obviously an inspiration, great coach, and inspirational leader doing a fab job at Leafield, which obviously the club is that you're now currently at as well.
Yes, that's it.
Over there. So I appreciate the comment, David, as well. Fully agree on that one. So Tash, I will just start with you in terms of the game on Saturday and just your overall thoughts when the draw was made. I think from a United point of view, we were relatively happy. It's a home draw. It's a team 2 tiers below. So on paper, it looks like it should be a relatively straightforward task. I know Mark spoke earlier about, you know, we got to treat every game like a final. But how do you think West Brom are going to be looking at this one? Is it almost like a free hit and just go out there and kind of enjoy it kind of thing?
Look, I think the big one for West Brom is, you know, it's David versus Goliath. You know, it's one of those games where, you know, the expectation isn't for West Brom to win the game. The expectation is for West Brom to turn up and have a good experience against some incredibly talented footballers. You know, and I think that's what they need to take away from that. Listen, if they come away from the game with anything, fantastic. And I have no doubt that Chev and the team will be prepping to not just take part in the game on Saturday. They'll be there to go and challenge. They're that kind of team, and I think they've got some individuals there that, you know, are fantastic individuals, and as a team they're growing. So it's been quite a relatively new build for West Brom. And I think, you know, you can look at some of their results and people will turn their nose up at some of their results. You know, they've had some disappointing results, but they've also had some really, really strong results as well. And I think, listen, they need to go and enjoy it. And just, I guess, the experience for them will be one that they'll never forget. And I think that's what's really important, that West Brom go into that game with, like you say, taking it as a bit of a free hit, but also knowing that they do want to go and challenge and go toe-to-toe with the best in the country, because effectively that's what they'll be doing on Saturday. So it'll be an interesting one, but I do believe that the calibre of players that they do have, they can absolutely pose a threat, and it just depends on how Chev sets up and how they go about it. That's pretty much what I think, really.
No, absolutely. I want to come back to you actually in terms of West Brom season, a couple of individual players, but I guess, Keris, from the United point of view, are you looking at this in terms of, you know, I'll probably ask you a bit later on in terms of what players we're expecting to see. It's a shame, actually. I will just quickly say this, that a couple of the players that have gone on loan, the likes of, you know, we're expecting Lucy Newell and, you know, Simpson's already gone on loan. Watson, they were probably the players that would have featured in this game that we're probably now not going to see, albeit they're going to be smashing it for the clubs that they're going to. But how are you feeling from a United point of view going into this?
Yeah, I think it's a weird one in women's football because teams at the sort of level that West Brom are at are usually quite like, it's harder to watch them. It's harder to kind of get an idea of them. It's not like in the men's game where, say, the equivalent here, like League One, you can find highlights from more or less any game because the club will have them if a TV channel doesn't. Whereas in the women's game, it's really difficult to know what's going on. So going into these matches, it's always a little bit of an unknown quantity. Like I remember with Newcastle, who we obviously had in the cup at this same stage last year, we beat them comfortably, but I thought they gave a pretty good account of themselves. So as like a United fan, it's kind of, you want these tests against less familiar teams. You want to kind of get the players testing themselves against opponents that they're not familiar with, because they can analyse another Super League team until the cows come home. They know pretty much exactly what to expect, whereas West Brom, they won't have that same level of knowledge. So it will be an interesting one for sure. I'm pretty confident, just sort of because the gap between the divisions in the women's game is still really big, but I'm really excited to kind of see it and to get to see another team as well, because it's always good to watch. Like we saw with obviously got to see Newcastle in the cup last season, and now we're seeing them make that progress up through the pyramid. It's nice to see these teams as they're sort of like starting out on their journey.
No, absolutely. I've been quite lucky actually to watch West Brom a couple of times, obviously being semi-local to me actually with the league they're in, obviously with Starbridge and the teams in and around there. I've been lucky enough to watch them quite a few times. And again, I think they're kind of in and around. In fact, Tash, I'll come to you in terms of their season so far. In terms of, you mentioned a couple of disappointing results there as well. How would you, I guess, sum up where they currently are? Because I think every time I've watched them, I kind of expect them. They're just kind of that mid-table team at the moment in Tier 3, and have kind of can't really get. Obviously, when you had Newcastle in the league and Forest now, obviously are doing pretty well in there, and Burnley, and these strong teams that are in that division, it's always going to be tough. But for me, they've always kind of sat around that mid kind of table mark. Is that how this season has gone as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, like I mentioned previously, I think they're still in the build stage. I really do, and I think that's something that's going to come with time. And you mentioned already, your Forests, your Burnleys of the world now. They're getting really good backing. Forest are full time. We're still looking at West Brom as a part-time club, which is essentially what they are. These players are still working alongside what they're doing, so naturally they are going to fall into that sort of mid-table bracket. They've got better backing than they did when I was there, and I'm sure there's other things in the pipeline, but I think you are right. They probably are a mid-table team, but by saying they're a mid-table team doesn't mean that they can't go and beat the likes of Burnley and Forest, because on their day, I do actually think that they could challenge anybody. And like you've mentioned, they've got individuals there that are special individuals, and as a group, and having known, I know Chev personally, and I've worked with her, and I was at the Albion at the same time as Chev, and I know what kind of coach she is, and she's fantastic. You've mentioned Lucy Newell already, and Lucy Newell came up through the Albion Academy, and she is a fantastic talent. I was there when she was 16 years old, and 15, 16 years old, and she was fantastic. Like, that's not the that's the kind of player that that Chev has helped to sort of, I guess, bring in through the club and worked hard with. So she's got great exposure, experience as a coach, and she's got some excellent players on her roster as well. So yes, they're mid-table, but I do think they will start climbing up that table. Whilst they're still in that build process, though, that they will stay around there. But I think next season could be a completely different kettle of fish for them.
Yeah, and I guess from my side, obviously, whenever I've watched that league, it's a hard league to get out of anyway. Wolves have pushed for a number of years now to try and get out of that division. And again, I think they're currently in second at the moment. But as you mentioned, obviously, Forest going full time, they will probably be the team that goes up this season from that division. You'd expect them to, similar to when Newcastle did it. You mentioned a couple of players there, and obviously we've put the story around this game has obviously been deemed as the Ravjong Derby. It's been highly publicised. Obviously, Evie, unfortunately, is not going to be available for this one. So there's obviously a lot of talk around Liv and everything like that. But what other players would you say, I guess, are key players for West Brom? Just to give them a few shout-outs on here in terms of standout players for them that maybe people haven't heard of.
I think for me, obviously, as you know, you'll know Liv anyway. Well, you'll know Evie more, but Liv's a fantastic player and a fantastic person. She actually works with us at Leafield, and she's our player care as well. So for me, Liv is a fantastic person, and I know that it's a massive thing for her family on Saturday, and it must be really special. So for that to be, and I think there has been a lot of talk about it, and I think there deserves to be talk about it because it is special. It's not very often, you go up against your sister, and sadly, like you say, Evie can't take part, which is a real shame. But it'll still be a massive occasion for the family, which is really fantastic. I think for me, they've got some excellent players. There's Phoebe Warner is fantastic. I don't want to give too much away, but you probably have seen Phoebe and seen how she plays. She just plays in that little creative pocket of space, and she really does make things happen. I think she's quite deceiving because she's very small, but by being quite small, she's quite tidy on the ball. She is definitely one that I'd say is probably a real key player for West Brom. They've got a hard tackling midfielder in Fran Orthodo who's fantastic. Will battle anything and anybody. She isn't bothered who the person is, where they've been. She's just there to play football and give the best that she can for her team. And then you've got the likes of the people that have potentially been there and already done it. Ash Brown played for Aston Villa. Has played in relatively similar sort of calibre of games as she will do on Saturday. And I just think as a group there's a number of new players that I don't know a lot about, but having seen them in sort of like in-house friendlies that we potentially played against each other, I know that there's something there that's quite exciting for West Brom. But for me, definitely, I should be on Phoebe Warner on Saturday for sure. She's been at a higher level, and you can see that. And the best of it is she's just humble, and I don't think she really realises how good she is as a person or player. So, I think that'll be a really exciting one to watch and see how she gets on Saturday.
No, absolutely, definitely. And is Ash back from her injury now? I think the last time I saw she was, I think, was it an ACL she was out with for it?
So that's she's been back for quite a bit now, and I think she's definitely hitting those heights again of what she did previous to the ACL injury. And I think it's always difficult to come back from an ACL injury when you're not in full-time football. But listen, she's an athlete. She's fast. She's strong, and she's brave. And sometimes you'll see players come back from ACL sort of in the your tier 3s, your tier 4s, and they're never quite the same player. But that hasn't happened with Ash. She's worked extremely hard to be where she is now, and I think she's she hasn't changed as opposed to what she was when I played against her. When we sort of played Villa when I was at Stoke, which was a very similar time. It was a January, and she was fantastic then, and she's the same as she was then. So.
No, that's good to see, and hopefully they do give us a bit of a test on that one. Tash, I'm conscious of time, obviously about 10 minutes or so, but Keris, I want to come back to you with a question. You mentioned about the gap between the tiers at the moment, and just a question for you, and Tash, I'm going to ask you the same question in a second as well, in terms of what you think can be done then to close that gap a little bit, because what I don't want to see on Saturday, and I'm saying this as a United fan, is a really big scoreline. I don't think it helps things. I think when we're looking at the Women's FA Cup, particularly in some of these earlier rounds, and you're seeing massive, 20+0 score lines, and I'm just like, I don't want to see that. Obviously, I want United to win and to win well on Saturday, but I don't want to see a massive kind of score line that will potentially, I don't know, for me, it just doesn't look great, albeit it can't be helped. So, Keris, obviously you mentioned this. What do you think could be done potentially to close that a little bit?
So funny you should ask, Connor, because I literally just wrote a massive article about this, as you know. But yeah, I think you're completely right. Like, we saw it obviously in the international game. I think it's got a lot better. Like, if you look at sort of World Cups from years gone by, where it was not that uncommon to see your 13-0s from the top teams against teams who didn't have the same funding. And I think money's not everything, but a lot of it does come down to that. So in a lot of my research, I looked at kind of the funding that's available to Women's National League teams. Obviously, Tash mentioned, I think it's a really important point, that those leagues aren't full-time professional mostly. It's up to the jurisdiction of the club. So I think Forest are either full-time or going full-time. Wolves moving towards that as well, but they're very much outliers. So other than that, your players are going to have other full-time jobs. They're not going to be earning a living from football. And that naturally impacts performance, right? If you don't have as much time to train, it impacts your recovery from injury is a massive part of it. Players might not have the same medical insurance because, again, it's up to the club. So say someone in a National League team does tear their ACL, they might have to fund that privately. Like to get the surgery, that can be like $9,000 just straight off the bat. So I think money is a huge thing to kind of narrow that gap. I think we're seeing it close a lot of the time now just because of the sheer talent that is coming through the academies, like the volume of girls who have learned to play football at school, even like in my lifetime, has got so much higher that the talent coming through up the lower tiers is naturally higher. But I think then to push it on to the next level, that's where your funding needs to come in, because we've got the potential now for 3 or 4 top quality leagues worth of female football players, right? So we've got the potential there and the volume of players who can reach that level. But then it's about how do we tap into that potential? I think that is probably for me where money comes in.
Yeah, and Tash, I'll throw the same question over to yourself. And obviously, Keris mentioned the money there. And it's interesting when you look at the FA Cup prize money for this round, the winner gets 54,000 and the loser gets 13. So West Brom obviously a guaranteed 13 whatever happens. Do you think that is enough for a team that's obviously in the 4th round proper to have that motivation really to push the teams further in this competition?
I don't think it's enough now. So the short answer is no. I guess the long answer is it's £13,000 more than they've got. So I think we've got it. Yes, it should be more. We don't compare the two men's football to women's football. It's just football. We shouldn't compare it, but we do. If we look at the same sort of round for the men's FA Cup, it's crazy how much money and the disparity between the two. But yes, £13,000 to West Brom would be fantastic. Of course it would. Then if we said to them now, do you want £13,000? They say yes. Okay, so that's guaranteed. That's fantastic. But is it enough? No, I don't think it is. Because like Keris has just rightly said, we need the funding is the main part of it. We are creating and we are bringing players through that are fantastic, and they're just getting taken by clubs with money because they deserve the best. These players deserve the best. If there's a player at a club that I'm at and I see them and they are better than what I think we can give, why shouldn't they go and be at a higher level? Because we can't physically give that, and I think that's a big problem. And I do think the disparity it's so large still. Yes, we've moved forward. When I played when I was 18, 19, I don't even think there was any money at all in the FA Cup, for women. So yes, it's moved forward, especially in the lower leagues. Yes, we've moved forward, but are we moving forward quick enough? Probably not. But I think we do have to be really careful that we don't move forward too quickly as well. So I think it's a catch-22 really, but it's definitely funding that's the issue. 100%. That's the stumbling block with, your tier 4s, and that's your stumbling block at tier 3. You'll know yourself, Connor. You've Stourbridge, you've probably been to see Stourbridge. You look at the likes of Calcer, Stourbridge, Halifax. You ask them if there's any funding or finance going into that, they'll probably tell you no. And that is where you will see the teams that are potentially getting support financially, and where you'll see the teams that are pretty much haven't really got that backing.
No, for sure. I remember actually speaking to somebody who you probably will know, actually, Tash. I think she was at West Brom with you, but Kerry Walker, who was my gateway actually into women's football years ago, because I remember she was in the WSL when it was WSL 1 and 2. I think I can't remember whether it was Oxford or Reading she was at the time. No, it was Watford, actually. I think it was at the time. And I remember speaking to her about it. And I'm like, why are you working here then? Like, you've playing football at one of the highest levels, and obviously then you learn and everything else. I remember speaking to her recently about this, that yes, it's grown and it's great to see, but maybe not enough has filtered down through the pyramid to some of these other teams. I think you're seeing bigger contracts now at the top, and I say this a lot on these kinds of shows, but me being around Worcester City, for example, now, and I go down there a lot. Obviously, it's amazing they're playing at Six Ways at the moment, which is a brilliant stadium. But the gap, I mean, it's only about 4 tiers between the top and the tier they're in. But the gap in everything is so big that maybe it's just not caught up enough. It's great that it's growing, but some of that money for me needs to filter down. 50,000 to Manchester United is not going to make an ounce of difference. Like that's most players or most men's players' weekly wage. That is really not going to touch the sides. So for me, I would just scrap it for those kind of teams and give it to some of these teams down in the lower periods that get this far. I don't know how many other teams are in there from tier 3 and in and around that, but yeah, it's as you both said, it's definitely funding. There's a quick question for you, Tash, here in terms of what's your thoughts on expanding the WSL Championship. I guess for somebody in the pyramid, would that affect things further down as well, do you reckon?
Potentially it would. Yeah, I do think it would be a good move. I think it makes things more competitive. But again, there's going to be teams that won't be able to compete at that level. Again, talking about finance and funding because of that. And I think that's where we'll probably end up. You will really see a difference between, I guess what we'd call the top league to sort of what we'd look at sort of tier, what would tier 4 and 5 look like from there. Those better players, those more advanced players in your sort of tier 4s will move up, no doubt. But I think hopefully it happens, but I don't know I don't know how that would work and how that would look for sort of your lower tiers, I guess. I think it would be a struggle for those. We'd have to look at, I guess, reorganising sort of the lower end of women's football as well, which I think would prove pretty difficult.
Yeah, as you said, obviously a lot of this comes back to money as well. I think Palace have done pretty well in the WSL coming up this year, but I think I look at some championship teams and thought if you expanded the WSL to 14, 16, some of those championship teams would get destroyed, I think, in the current WSL in terms of where it's at. And even with tier 3, if you move some of them into the championship, even some of them that, like I said, that are not full-time, that's a big problem.
Exactly. I was going to say, that's the conversation we always have when we talk about expanding the league, right? It's like, it's great to expand it, but only if the support comes with it. Say you have 3 teams getting promoted each season rather than 1. But if it just becomes this boomerang system where you go up and you come straight back down like every single season, it's not financially sustainable for the clubs because there's costs associated with going up as well. Like your operating costs, obviously your profits will change, your operating costs will also change. So it's not as easy a fix as it sometimes looks like. But I agree with you, Tash, like it's something I think long term we can't keep having a 12-team top division. The season's just too short as much as anything. Like there's just not enough games to get it on the map as much.
I think touching on that, sorry, Connor, just touching on that as well, we'd be asking people to give up full-time jobs. Now these people are giving up full-time jobs that they might have a mortgage, they might have a family, and we're asking them to give it up. We're asking them to play football for 9 months, and potentially that club could pull the rug from underneath them. They get relegated, and all of a sudden, you've now not got a job, you've got no income. So what do you do then? We could go on all night because it would spiral, but you're absolutely right. It does need to improve. It does need to expand. But what about those that take that chance and then basically go straight back, get the rug pulled from under them, and they've got nothing again? It's tough.
It certainly is. I remember speaking to a couple of players actually that at clubs that then went full time and they chose not to pursue a career in football because they said it was too much of a risk because they're like, well, I'm getting offered X amount with this. That's less than my full time job. Is it worth that risk going into it? Because as you said, obviously football's a risky business and everything else. I don't envy anyone making that decision because I don't know how I would make that decision when it comes around to it. Right, I'm really conscious of time. I don't want to make you late for your training, but just a final word on West Brom in terms of, you kind of answered this at the start in terms of how good it is for those players being able to test themselves. Have you got kind of anything else to add in terms of, what this will mean for them? And you can whack a score on it if you want to, if you want to add some kind of prediction in there, but just a final word on West Brom and, maybe what people can expect and how good it is, I guess, for them to test themselves here.
Yeah, I think, listen, it's going to be a big challenge for West Brom. They're under no illusion, I don't think, and I think they're real, they're realists, and you've got to go and you've just got to give your best shot. David v Goliath, who knows what could happen? We say that FA Cup magic, but as Kevis has already said, when you look at a Premier League team towards a League One team, yes, there is a chance. I'm not saying there's no chance for West Brom because, the players that they've got. I do hope that they do give a good account of themselves. And I think for them, it'll just be about getting a good account of themselves and everyone that's watching, for everyone to go, actually, do you know what? They might not have won the game, but but fair play to them, because they've given Man United a real good go today, and I think that's exactly what they need to go out and do. And if I was a gaffer there, that's what I'd be sending the message out with. You know, at the end of the day, are you supposed to beat them? Probably not. Okay, but we go out there, you go and enjoy it, and you go and give the best account of yourselves. And I think that's the best thing that they can do, and that's the way that they're going to enjoy the experience. And you know, I really do hope that they do that. And for me, if I'm going to put a score on it, I'm going to go 3-1 to United. As much as it pains me.
West Brom to score. To be fair, our defence has been pretty good this season, but you know we did concede 3 in the League Cup, so against Newcastle. So you know we can concede goals in the cups, as we've already seen. So yeah, there's potential there as well. Is there anything you want to shout out, Tash, while you're on here before we let you go? And you know, I mentioned at the start, and obviously David put it in the chat. You do a lot of work, as you mentioned, obviously around player care and that kind of thing. Is there anything particular you want to shout out before we let you go?
I think for me, if people are probably aware of it, but if they're not aware, go out and follow the Maddie Cusack Foundation. I think that's a big thing for me. Get out there, go and support him. You know, just even if you just, you know, follow them on Twitter, follow them on Instagram. They are an absolute credit to themselves. And I know that it's been a really, really tough couple of years, 18 months. And I think they deserve the world. And I think what they're doing for women's football is fantastic. So that's my shout out. Absolutely. I think, and you know, I think for me, it's a case of, you know, really showing support to them, and it'll help them moving forward. And they might not ever, you know, they will never ever forget. But you know, we can support them in I guess the social media way, and also by donating as well. I think that'd be fantastic. But yeah, that's for me. That's the most important thing for me at the minute, and it's all I'll ever bang on about, as you know. But it's really, really important that we as women's football, you know, fans, supporters, you know, coaches, we start to really take real care of the player as a person, as opposed to anything else.
No, absolutely. I believe it's still your pinned tweet as well. The account on there as well. So we'll leave all that in the description so it's easy for people to find. Tash, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Go in and enjoy your training and things like that.
Thank you ever so much. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
No worries at all. You've been absolutely brilliant. I know obviously everyone in the chat enjoyed your insight as well into a team that, as we said, may not know much about.
Cheers. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thanks,
nice. Thank you.
Bye.
I just removed Keris at the same time. There we go.
Oh, sorry about that. My Wi-Fi packing in as per usual. Yeah, echo what Tash said 100%. The Maddie Cusack Foundation, obviously me being based in Sheffield, I've been lucky enough to speak to Olivia Cusack for an article I did about a fundraiser they were doing, and they are one of some of the best people I've spoken to, and everyone I've spoken to in sport. So 100%, if you're not aware of their work, do go and check it out. They're doing really good stuff.
No, absolutely. As I said, I'll leave all that in the description so it's easy for people to find. It's definitely worth the follow. And as I said, make sure you're following Tash as well, because she's absolutely brilliant in everything that she is promoting in women's football, you know, in particular as well, and everything else. Right, we'll talk a little bit about United, and as I said, we'll talk about Lad and the loan deals and everything else a little bit later on. But Keris, in terms of this game in particular, I mentioned obviously the types of players we've sent out on loan. These are the types of players that I would have thought would have played in this game, but obviously we don't have them anymore. We've still got a couple. I think Marie Griffiths is potentially, somebody. I think somebody mentioned Phoebe Chadwick earlier on as a potential, in this one. But in terms of the team that you would put out, we don't have too many in terms of what you would call younger rotation players that could feature in this one. So I would think this team is going to be pretty strong, to be honest.
Yeah, I would think that in terms of the kind of defense, I would imagine it's going to be the same. I'd expect us probably to stick with Fallon in net as well. And across the back line, I mean, the only rotation you may maybe have Aoife come in at right back to get some minutes. But other than that, you look at our defensive options, like with Newell and others going on loan, and this is the sort of game where you'd be looking forward to seeing them. Unfortunately, that's now obviously not an option because they're going to be going and smashing it elsewhere. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's a really good point that was raised in the comments earlier as well about obviously we are going into a run of 3 games in 3 games in 10 days. I think 2 of them against City. So we will want to rotate as much as we can. because we don't really need to be rotating against City, I don't think. So the more rest that we can give players this weekend, the better. I'd expect to see sort of relatively normal back four, potentially with the addition of Mannion. I'd expect to see Miyazawa coming into the midfield. I think potentially just, again, subs used heavily as well. I'd like to see Golson start. I think she's been really good recently, and it just offers that little bit of kind of rest for maybe a Bizet or a Jace as well, that we can just kind of like, I know they're predominantly on the right, but I'd like to see Golson starting. I think it's a game where she could really just up her confidence again after coming back from that injury. Not that she particularly looks like she needs it. But yeah, I'd like to see her starting. Yeah, I mean, there's not that many rotations to go through anymore.
I think that's the thing. And Truth asked the question. Obviously, we're waiting for Mark Skinner's press conference tomorrow about this to confirm it. But as far as I'm aware, Ella Toon and Lisa Nelson will be back. But as far as I'm aware, it'll be a fully fit squad. I don't think we've got anyone, obviously, barring Evie and obviously Blundell, and everyone out, barring the long-term ones. I think everyone is back, which would then beg the question, because I kind of look at this in two ways. Because as Highlane put the comment, obviously, that's what I was just googling to check that team we played against Newcastle. It was the back five that we see in the WSL. It was Ladd and Zellum, it was Jace, Tooney, and Garcia and Paris up front, which was basically our WSL team at the time. I think we went to Chelsea and played that same team pretty much. Now, my point is almost like we've got City a week later. The team have just had 3 weeks off. Do we need them to get a run out? Albeit maybe not as competitive as it's going to be against City. Maybe they need that minutes in the leg. So I actually think it's going to be pretty close to the team we see against City in the first half. Get them all out there, and then once maybe we're 3-4 up, whatever, then the subs start to come on and everything else. But I agree. I think
nice bit of confidence from you there. Once we're like 4-0 up,
I would hope so.
You would. Hope so.
That's what I'm kind of leaning towards. I mean, Sport is mentioning Awujo in the midfield. To be honest, the only players I can think of potentially coming in is Sandberg. I think probably starts at left back.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Awujo in midfield is a potential now. Obviously with no lads, maybe to give somebody a rest in the midfield. But then, like I said, I don't know whether he's just going to throw Ella Toon straight back in there. I hope he doesn't. I hope that her and Nelson come off the bench, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I would prefer to see them get like a 20-minute, 30-minute run out at the end rather than start at full pace. I think that would be a better way to take it on. I agree with what you said. I would like to see our kind of first team get minutes in the legs because they've got 2 massive games coming up. And I do think they will need to get some minutes in. But with the players that are coming back from injury, because we've got so many games coming up, I would just be really cautious with how quickly we put them back in. But obviously, we'll hopefully hear from Mark Skinner tomorrow about team news and all that sort of thing and whether everyone is available.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, because remember, before the Everton League Cup game, he specifically mentioned Watson and Simpson getting minutes in that game. So it'd be interesting to see tomorrow in the presser if he mentions certain players. I'll be listening out to see if there's any particular names that maybe come up in that one, because I expect to see some of them on the bench. Mairead Griffiths was on the bench for the last league game. Was it Palace? Which one was it? The League Cup game, Newcastle. She was on the bench for that one. So, potentially there's movement there. I just hope that as you said, if we're 3-4 up at the time, I'll say that now, if we're 3-4 up, that we make some change and get some. There's no need to be playing. Don't get me wrong. I expect the likes of Laetitia and Turner to play the whole game as they always do. And obviously, goalkeeper one's interesting. You said it's probably going to be Fallon. I agree. I think it probably will be Fallon. I think if Saf had kept a clean sheet against Newcastle, I think she probably would have started. I think with those 3 goals conceded, it's a little bit of a risk, albeit not a massive one, because Newcastle and West Brom are obviously a division apart themselves.
I think it's a little bit of a gamble, and I think it'll probably be something that the coaching staff who know her better than we do will be better placed to tell what is better for her confidence and kind of her development at this moment. Is it putting her in that situation in a knockout game where if she does make high profile mistakes, it's going to be, it was hard to see the way she was at the end of the Newcastle game. We don't want her to be in that position again. But then on the other hand, is it going to be worse for her confidence to feel that perhaps she's not trusted in this game? I think that's the sort of thing where the coaching staff will hopefully be much better placed to make that decision. I think we'll make it on what's best for her at this point.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I'm not kind of fussed either way because I think we'll have enough to win regardless of who's in net. But yeah, Amy's made the point. It was Earps against Newcastle last season because I remember that being a point of conversation.
Yes,
this time last year when Earp started, we were just like, Fallon's literally right there. Like, if she's not going to play in this, then she's never going to play. And I think that's the same for Saf. I think if she doesn't start this one, she won't play for United for the rest of the season because we're not going to get an easier game than this between now and the end of the season. Touch wood, unless Fallon gets injured. Which it begs the question, obviously, with January and buying another keeper and everything else. I know that's a hot topic of conversation right now as well. But we'll wait and see on that one. Before we get to some of the news that we've seen this week, then, in terms of, I guess, how much do you think this is a priority for United? Because I wrote in my cutback article that went out earlier when I got asked the questions that were on there in terms of priorities for the second half of the season. And I kind of put the FA Cup would almost be like a nice to have because we've won it now.
Yeah.
We've been to 2 finals in 2 years. Where do you place this in terms of a priority? Because, as you mentioned, City twice, then we've got Brighton, which obviously we've already dropped points to, and then Spurs away, I think it is. So some tricky-ish games, in games that we've potentially struggled in. Where would you rank this in terms of a priority for us this season?
It's a really hard one. Like you say, I think the reason the FA Cup was so important for the whole club, men's and women's, last season is because we were nowhere near winning anything else, to put it frankly. I think that was why it was really important. And especially like last season, because it was our first major trophy, other than if you're including the championship title, obviously, it was our first top flight major trophy. It was really important for that reason. The question is now kind of, what do we... I would like to see us in a situation, to be honest, where we've got the squad depth that we don't have to be this concerned about it, because the 2 games that actually bring the congestion are the 2 City games. This fixture in itself is actually just a separate week apart. It doesn't really add too much of a burden in terms of loading and congestion. I think for me personally, I never want to write off a cup game. It's something that I can understand the arguments around prioritising the league, but I think that that's sort of it's an easy way out almost, because I think as a top side, we should be striving to not have to choose between the 2. We should be at that stage where we can actually contest both with full force. I think we have hampered ourselves a little bit in that by sending so many young players out on loan, which indicates maybe to me that the cup is not as much of a priority, because if we do now rotate, it's going to be with players that were lower down the pecking order, if you get what I mean. So we're not those players who were sort of on the fringe breaking into the first team who you'd expect to see in a cup. They will now not be coming in to cup squads because they've all gone out on loan, meaning that it's kind of all or nothing in terms of squad selection. We don't have that middle ground to rotate into, which indicates to me that the cup is not as much of a priority, but I could be massively overthinking that. I don't know. Would you prioritise it?
I don't know. I certainly wouldn't be throwing the games. I wouldn't be thinking, I don't think any team would do that, but I do think the league we've got to get back in the top 3 this season for me. And I think if you gave me a choice of last season, I said a trophy any day. This season, I would take top 3 over a trophy, because I think that would do more for us moving forward in terms of the players that we want to attract and the current players we've got than what a Subway League Cup, for example, as Drew's put the FA Cup over the Sandwich Cup.
It's not got the same. It's just not got the same ring to it.
I want to win it though. I really want to win it.
Yeah, no, I would actually. I think it would be nice because we haven't won it, and also the finals the day after my birthday, so it would actually be really fun. But that's
and
not
also,
really.
Do you not think to win it, we will have had to have gone through probably the toughest run ever, because we'd have had a 2 WSL team group. Then we'll have had to have played City, obviously a quarter-final. It's likely going to be an Arsenal semi-final, then a likely Chelsea final. So it would have been the toughest.
Oh yeah, exactly. I think in terms of what it would take to win the League Cup at this point is pretty much the same kind of level of effort as it is going to take if you were to win the FA Cup. but it's just obviously not got that same kind of stature yet. Like the finals at Pride Park this year, isn't it? Like it's not the same stature as a Wembley final. So, and also it being the Subway Cup does like it just. I don't know. It's just not really got the same ring to it.
No, I think that's why I put in my piece. It's almost like I want to win it just because it's something we've not won before. And then once we win the WSL, we can start going singing that chant about we've seen it all, we've won the lot. Because we've seen that at the moment, and it's almost like we haven't though.
Yeah, no,
so
we haven't.
we need to tick that off just to say that we've done it. And then, when we get to the WSL, which obviously the club's ambition is to win it by 28. Yeah, maybe. Before we talk about the news of this week, then, do you want to whack a score prediction on this game?
I am going to say 5-1 to United. I think we could have a little moment and concede, but I think that we should be really comfortable with it, especially because we're going to be playing a pretty full strength attack. Someone in the chat pointed out our under 21s have beaten tier 3 sides this season. In obviously, I think that's in friendlies and stuff. I'm not 100% sure. So obviously there's a bit of a difference. But yeah, I think that I would expect this and hope that this would be comfortable.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think for me, this is going to sound really harsh on West Brom. I'm going to say 6-0 because I think we get a few goals and then we don't push it anymore because of obviously the games we've mentioned coming up. I just think we'll probably just sit off then and just let the game drift, which I'm fine with, to be honest. What will annoy me is if we go 2-0 up and then let the game drift, because it's like, come on, get some confidence in the players.
It's
get
also
some goals
I think
for those.
6-0 sounds harsh on West Brom, but it's one of those games where you have to think about it's where the scoreline can come down a little bit to individual quality, I think. Like we saw, this is what I noticed kind of in the Newcastle game last year. I don't think they played badly. As a team, I thought they looked like they knew what they were doing, and they looked like a team that was making progress. It was just that in the individual battles, in the 50-50s, in the chances, we were better at taking those chances. We were winning the duels. We were, winning the individual battles. I think that can make a difference, and the scoreline can sometimes sound a lot worse than it is because of that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Looking at the weather this weekend, United might actually be one of the only games on with postponements and potential cancellations and things like that. If anyone's looked at the weather for this weekend, obviously LSV is quite lucky in the manner that it is with the underfloor heating and everything else. That the pitch isn't going to be an issue. The roads surrounding it could be, but we'll wait and see come Saturday what that's going to be like. And any potential postponement there, but we'll wait and see. As I said, I'm expecting it to be relatively comfortable. I think West Brom will do well. I hope they do, because as Tash said, I don't want to see a big scoreline here. I want it to be respectable. I want them to make us earn it rather than gift it to us. And that's how these games should be. So I hope that they do. Right, before we round the show off, then we've got to talk about some of the news of this week. We'll start with a big one, because I said it a second ago. And I don't think Michael liked my comment when I said no lad or that hurt. A sadder departure than I actually thought it was going to be in the end, because as I put on my own tweet, it's a shame I think that it's come to this. That, as people know, was with us when we first joined the WSL, has been with us, a number of years, played over 100 appearances, won the FA Cup, scored goals in derbies, and, scored a lot of good goals for us as well, actually. Keris, what's your thoughts on this one there? Because we kind of hinted, and people that have watched my TikTok lives back in November, I was talking about a player that was likely to leave in the early part of January. This was obviously this was the player obviously we're referring to. We kind of knew in the last 10 days or so this was very likely to happen. I asked the question on the Palace review that's probably the last time we've seen lad, and it is in a United shirt. What do you make of how this has all happened, the fact that it's Everton, and just your overall thoughts on it?
I think for her, I think it's a really good move. I couldn't see her breaking back into the squad. And I think Everton are a team that are competing at a high enough level that she can compete there and get the sense that, and give the international team the sense that she's still competing at that highest level, and she's getting those minutes that really matter, and she's getting up to that standard of fitness that would be needed for, obviously, in case I've never mentioned it, Wales going to the Euros this summer. So I think, and also Everton have obviously had a horrible time with injuries this season. I think she probably walks into the starting 11. I think that's probably fair to say, or maybe not walks, but gets in pretty easily. So she will get those minutes there. But from our perspective, I think it is a real shame the way it's happened. I think someone who has been that much of a servant to the club, that much of a fan favourite, to not really get, it's the sort of same thing as we said with Katie Zellum and some other players. Like, we didn't really get the chance to say goodbye. And it's the sort of thing that at the end of the day, in football terms, it doesn't really matter. But I think it matters a lot to fans, and I think it does matter to players as well, to get that sort of opportunity. So that's a real shame. I think it's a hard one to take, but for her, I think it's a really good move, and I think it's one that makes a lot of sense both for her and the club, because obviously with her contract coming up in summer, I think that was very unlikely to be renewed. So we can take the kind of silver lining that it's not another player lost on a free transfer. We have actually recouped some of that fee this time.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think for her, this is a great move. And I think for Everton, it's a really good. Everton are looking good in this window, the players they've signed. And, I expect a couple more there as well. The fee truth was undisclosed. So not something I guess either. But I think it's the saying goodbye to fans thing is a tough one, isn't it? Because did the club know in advance that she was going? Did they know that Everton were going to come in, for example? When we play Crystal Palace, the club can't announce that Lad's leaving if they didn't already know that she was. My understanding of it was Lad had asked to go. The club had granted that, but they were waiting for an offer. If Everton didn't put any offer in before the Palace game, there was no guarantee that Lad was going. So if they did a big goodbye post and then Lad ended up staying, so I understand this one a little bit more, because it is tough if they didn't have any offers at the time, and obviously had to wait till January anyway. My frustration is I just don't think she should have stayed past the summer, if I'm being totally honest. She spoke about having offers and thinking about leaving in the summer. I think it probably should have just happened then. And like the other players at the back end of last season, Zell and Mary and Lucia and these kind of players, then we'd have got a chance to say goodbye to them properly, albeit we know how the last game of the season went, but it would have been a bit better to have those moments as well. So it's a really tough one. I think it's a massive shame. I still stand by. I think she's one of our better midfielders. I think she is one of the most underrated players that we've had, along with players like Vilda and so on, that just doesn't get the credit for what she did in a United shirt and obviously what she's doing for Wales. So, yeah, I think it's a brilliant move for her, and I'm really happy for her. And obviously we get the chance to see her again because she's going to be coming back to LSV in a couple of months' time with Everton. So I'm sure she'll get an amazing reception when she comes back.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll get a brilliant reception. Like, she's just always been one of those players that if you even if the whole team has not played very well, if someone was to be like, did anyone play well today? You'd be like, do you know what? Actually, Hayley Ladd didn't really put a foot wrong. Like, she was one of them players. She wasn't always like the flashiest or anything like that, but she was always just like, she was always there. I could always rely on her to do a job. And she scored literally my favourite goal of all time, that I will never, ever forget, in that derby in 2023. So, and I'm including like the Tooney goal at Wembley in that, which I know is a really controversial shout, but just like the context at the time was, that game was guaranteeing us Europe. I believe knocking City out of the running for Europe. It might have been the first time we'd beaten them in the league, potentially, or the first time we'd beaten them at league, maybe. Anyway, it was just, and I remember it was record attendance at the time, and that was probably, I think, one of my favourite atmospheres I've ever felt at Lee. So that moment, I think, is a really nice legacy for her, but so are all the moments that went really unnoticed as well, that fans will remember. Like, people will remember that goal, but fans will really remember all the other performances that she put in as well, where they didn't get like the highlight reel or whatever, but she was absolutely key to that whole season.
No, absolutely. As Ema said, they're solid players, best description. I don't remember having a bad game. I think that's testament to her and her character. I put it, on the tweet that, she was a model professional, never kicked off, never did any of that. You never heard any issues about her. She just got on with it. And even, when she left, it was a nice goodbye post, and that was that. She kind of just gets on and does what she does there. And I think you mentioned that game, actually, the goal, obviously the derby that she scored in. I remember me and you were talking about this when I put the tweet out and looking at the players that we had in that team and how many are now not here. The likes of Honor and Lucia, Alessia, Martha Thomas, Vilda, Mary, Zell, now Haley. Like most of that squad is gone. Which is a bit of a shame, really, when you look back. I know teams change. Before you all come at me saying, players do come and go. I know they do, but that team was so good. Not that this one isn't.
That season was so good. Like that season was the time that it was like, oh, okay, like we are breaking into this top group now. Like it's not a top 3 anymore; it's a top 4. And then obviously, like the season after that, we finished 5th. But like, you know what I mean? That was the season where we really kind of built that optimism and that feel around the club. I think Sporty's right as well. Solid players who fly under the radar are usually the most important to your squad. Yeah, that's pretty much it, I think.
No, absolutely. And yeah, obviously, as we said, we wish her well. I hope she does really well at Everton. Obviously, I hope she doesn't play well against us, but I hope she does really well at Everton because she deserves it. And I hope she has a good Euros as well. I don't like talking about the Euros. You said at the start, you're not going to stop mentioning it. It annoys me because Scotland should be there. But
I don't know what to tell you.
We're going to talk about that.
I hope that when I will see Hayley Ladd at Leeds Sports Village when we play them at home, and then I hope I will see her in Switzerland as well. But who knows?
Yeah. Highlands put there. That's an interesting comment. There's only 5 pre-22 players left now. Obviously, the remaining OG and Hannah and Aoife. And to be fair, Hannah and Aoife, I don't think are guaranteed to be here past going into next season. Obviously, Hannah, when she comes back from pregnancy, whether she's going to be still, I think she'll play a couple, but then after that, I'm not entirely sure. And Aoife, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if she moved on in the summer either. So, yeah, not too many. And also, people forget Millie's contract is also up come the summer as well. So I know with an option and these kinds of things, but not saying anything, but it's not always guaranteed these things anymore. That's the thing I've taken with United over the last 12 months. Nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that we have to remember going into all of these transfer windows is to just be ready.
Even saying we're honorary Welsh people. To be fair, I'll take that. I'll support Wales and when they're there. Because who else am I going to support? The United girls, but obviously maybe I'll just go with Wales. Who knows? Let's move on. Speaking of Scotland, then let's move on to our Scottish player who's moved also to Everton, Emma Watson. Again, this got a little bit of a weird reaction. Some people complaining about this, saying that I saw, and I'm saying this to offer the balance of the conversation, but people saying that why have we done this? She just broke into the United first team, played a couple of games and scored and things like that. Where do you stand on this? Do you think this is a good move for her? Do you think it's the wrong time? What's your kind of thoughts on everything around her loan?
I think it's a really good move for her. Again, same as Hayley. I think it's a great move for her. I think she should get definitely more consistent minutes than she would have got here at United. I can see some people's concern a little bit in the fact that it's just a little bit of depth gone. As it's all of a sudden we look fine, and then all of a sudden, if we do get an injury in that midfield with Ladd having left and Emma out on loan, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, we're not actually sure who steps in here. I do understand that concern, but I think long term it's the same. Like it's almost similar to hopefully what Grace Clinton did. As a midfielder going on loan to a fellow WSL club, made a really big splash there, and brought her loads of experience. She did incredibly well, and she's come back and is now smashing it for us. So if we can follow that kind of pattern, I think the loan market can be a really valuable way to develop our young players. I just hope that when she comes back, it's not that this loan has set back her progress in getting into the squad because we feel that she's no longer a fit or she's moved into playing in a different system and we have to go back to the start. I hope it's like what happened with Grace Clinton, where she was sort of on the brink and then went on loan and continued an upward trajectory and then kept going on that trajectory here rather than going back to the start. If that makes any sort of sense. I think it's a good move for her unless we get another midfield injury, in which case we'll all be like, oh no.
I agree, actually. And I think, the talent for me is there, but, WSL experience, I think, is something that is very valuable. And I think she'll do really well at Everton. Someone mentioned earlier on, I think Brian Sorensen's a very good coach, actually. I think he's doing a lot better than what people think.
I think he does really. He's got a good record with developing like loan talent and young players as well. So I think it should be a really positive move for her. And I really look forward to seeing how she does.
No, absolutely. And I'll be intrigued to know what the conditions are in terms of playing against us, actually, because that is
she will not be able to play against us, I don't think. In the league, it's almost invariably they can't play against their parent club.
Unless United give an all clear. They won't. I'm not saying United probably won't do it, but I thought I'd entertain that anyway, just thinking about what if she does. But yeah, as Amy is saying there, Beaver Jones, Jess Parks, another one. Went to Everton, did well. Obviously, Clinton, we sent out on loan, obviously did well at Spurs and Bristol as well. So it's definitely, I think, the right thing. But I do look at that. I think Amy's just put a comment there. It only makes sense if a midfield sign's coming in. That worries me. It doesn't worry me a lot, I can't lie, because I think we've got the players there that can play a number of positions anyway. But it worries me a little bit when you've got our midfield now is Janssen, Lisa, Tooney, Grace. I'm going to miss somebody here. That's 4. We're missing Henny. Is that it? 5? I'm missing somebody, aren't I? I can't think of who it is, though.
We can't win, can we? We were talking earlier on about
Awujo, Simi. I knew there was somebody.
Oh my God, we're never going to fit all the midfielders. No one's going to get a chance. And now we're like, whoa, where are all the midfielders? So, sorry. We will find a reason to complain. Yeah, of Simi as well. Duh. Yeah.
I knew I was missing somebody.
6 for 3 positions is...
It's enough. I think it is enough. My worry is the amount of injuries we've picked up already in the first half of the season, particularly training injuries, worries me a little bit. So, providing they tone the training down a little bit or do whatever they've been doing wrong in the first half and fix that, I think we'll be all right. But, as I said, I think we've got players that can play a number of positions. Dom can play it, in our actual position at centre back, should we need to, should there be injuries there. So, I think we're all right, overall. And we can always recall the loans should we want to. If we get really straps, in terms of players that are injured, you can record the loan anyway. So, I'm not massively worried, to be honest. That does kind of lead me on to, in terms of Jess. She's also out on loan, Bristol City again. She was there before she did her ACL, so she's going there till the end of the season as well. Again, I'm assuming good mood. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think she was. It's not the same situation as Watson, where Watson was really starting to break into the team. I think Simpson, she made her debut, didn't she?
Against Everton.
Yeah, against Everton in the League Cup. So she was, in that sense, she was breaking through a little bit, but I don't think she was as far down that path as Emma. So I think it's a good move for her to go away and get that experience. Bristol are doing all right in the Championship as well. So hopefully but they're not pushing, they're not quite, I don't think they're top. You hear me?
They're definitely not top. Birmingham are top.
No, they are. They are second. They're level on points, to be fair to them, and 2 behind on goal difference. So yeah, it'll be a really competitive squad for her to be in, and she will be playing in really high caliber games. Same goes for Lucy as well. If she makes that move, I think it'll be positive for her development as well. I'm happy with those 2 loans. I think they're smart moves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think Jess is an interesting one because I think Lucy's a little bit different. Obviously, coming through at centre back, there's maybe not as much competition there. But I think with Jess, she's coming back. I mentioned Hannah a second ago. You've got Blundell, Gabby George, and Anna Sandberg, and then Jess as well. We've got 4 left backs there. You can't have 4 left backs. That's just too many. 3 is probably the right amount. But yeah, so I think it's going to be tough for her. She needs to have a really, really good 5 months at Bristol City, I think, to break into the first team. Otherwise, I think I fear a little bit that I think she may go in the summer after a successful-ish loan, unless she really does well.
Yeah, because unfortunately, she's in that sort of middle spot, right, where if she does well, it might just do enough to put her in the market, but it's not going to do enough to put her in the United first team. So she needs to absolutely smash it, or she needs to develop a bit and show us that she's going to keep developing and maybe go on another loan. But then it's how long does a player want to stay in that cycle, realistically?
No, I agree. And I think unless, Highland saying unless Hannah switched to right back permanently when she comes back, maybe as a kind of a backup right back as well. So it's a tough one. I think, we've got an interesting 6 months because there's a lot up in the air. I think there is a lot of negativity around the fan base at the moment. I think justifiably so with everything that's being said at the very top level at Manchester United at the moment. I don't think it's a surprise. But when there's a lot to be kind of excited about but nervous. We've got a lot of contracts coming up for renewal. Obviously, we've got this transfer window to get through first, but then we've got the summer one. We've got Mark Skinner's future. There's a lot of future in terms of the head of women's football role and, a new structure coming into play. There's a lot going on and a lot to, I said it, be cautiously optimistic about, excited about, nervous about, whatever phrase you want to use. There's a lot to be decided.
With any transitional period, right? I mean, that was the reason that Earps gave in her leaving post that the club's entering a period of transition, and she didn't basically want to deal with that uncertainty, was what I took from that post. So it can go either way, is the scary situation to be in. But yeah, I think there's a lot that's up in the air, and I think next season could look very different to this season.
No, absolutely. And that kind of leads me on, I guess, my finalist question. And I've quite enjoyed this. We've never really done 2-person shows on this channel before. It's always been 3 or 4 for those of you who've watched the channel for a while. I've quite enjoyed this, just having a little... We do this on WhatsApp and everything else.
Yeah, exactly.
So what we're essentially doing here, we're having our WhatsApp chat publicly with you guys adding in your thoughts as well. So this has been quite good.
It's good fun.
Exactly. So obviously we're in the January transfer window. We're 9 days in now. Obviously, at the time of recording this, what do you think we need desperately? Is there anything you think we need desperately? And what are you hoping for in terms of this window?
I think that we need a backup keeper. I wouldn't label it as desperate because it's not as I've said on the channel, I think before when we were talking about it in the summer transfer window, keeper is not a position you either do not need depth at all, or you need depth immediately because your first choice keeper is injured. Those are the 2 options. There is no in between. It's not a position that you will really rotate. So I would say we do need a backup keeper. I think that should be something that we would get on with. Other than that, I think the squad looks all right at the moment, to be honest, which is a nice position to be in. I think forwards-wise, our forward line, I'm really happy with the depth that we've got in there. The only place where I would potentially be thinking about, that maybe we need to add a little bit more depth is perhaps in the midfield. If we're looking at it thinking we've got 6 players for 3 positions, that's fine until someone I think that's basically the situation with our whole squad at the moment is it's fine until someone gets injured, is basically where we're at. But I do think that a defensive midfielder is this conversation that we've been having since Zalem left, really, is do we need to bring in a replacement for her? Or can the players that we've got, including Janssen, who obviously came in, can they fill that hole? I think that's the debate that we're going to keep having. I don't think we will bring in a defensive midfielder because I think Mark Skinner is happy with Janssen in that position. But I think that's the thing that fans will keep asking for.
Yeah, I think definitely a backup keeper. As I said, I'm going to plug my article again. Go and give that a read on the cutback. But that's the one position I said was a backup keeper because I think it will do Saf good as well because then you can loan Saf out and give her some game time as well. We saw
it takes the pressure off her.
Yeah, and she's not going to play between now and the end of the season. So will she learn at United? I'm sure she will. Obviously, learn enough. Fallon and Wilco obviously is a brilliant goalkeeper coach as well. So she will learn at United. I'm not doubting that, but I think you can't beat playing in the games and actually really experiencing it. So I hope that that's the case for her. But again, players will know that we're after a backup, and I think that's the difficult sell. When you're going into the market for a goalkeeper, they're going to know that they're a backup, not a first choice keeper. And I think that's a bit of a problem that we kind of find ourselves in. Maybe wait until the summer, I don't know, but we'll wait and see. As I said, I don't expect a massively busy window in terms of incomings, to be honest. I think a lot of our targets will be for the summer. Ewell saying a DM, backup goalie, a right back, and also a left winger. That's more of a summer thing, I think, on that one. Although I see your reasons.
January.
I mean, do not see
right
that
back, to be fair, I think we are... Right back, I think we're okay, aren't we? We've got Jade, who obviously does pick up her injuries, but God bless her, that's what she does. We have got Maya can go out into right back, and Janssen can come back in centre back, and someone else can fill that midfield role. So right back's not one that I'm overly worried about at the moment.
Not this
same
window.
with left wing. I think even if what we're talking about there basically is two positions where we've currently got injury prone players, and that is obviously a concern. But I think again we've got enough depth in the forward line that we can rotate if Galton does get injured. Mel can play on the left. Worst comes to worst, Jay Sobizek can probably switch over to the left as well. It's obviously not their strong position. And yeah, obviously Mannion at right back as well was the name that was on the tip of my tongue for our other right back. I was like, we do have a backup, but now it's completely left my head. I think we've got enough depth in those positions.
No, absolutely. I started laughing, Amy, because when I saw this, I genuinely thought you meant our Barry in terms of the one on the shows. And I was looking at it going, on loan where?
Yeah.
Where would he go? That's a good question. She's not, is she? I think she is.
I don't know.
She's been injured, so, I think she's back from injury now as well. So she's been recovering from an injury, so I can't actually remember whether she is or not. But that is another option. I actually wouldn't be surprised if she's back fit. Saturday could actually be a game for her. Actually, I think. See, Shane, I'm glad it's not just me that thought that was about.
This is what I thought as well.
Amy, you can call me that all you want. It wasn't just me. But yeah, as I said, I don't expect a busy window. I think a backup keeper is probably ideal. If we can get another forward in, great. Because obviously Rach and Leah and these kind of players are maybe not when we're looking to the next level, maybe. The kind of players that are there saying that, though. Leah's one of our highest in terms of goal involvements this season, so we kind of need to keep her fit. It's a tough one. But as I said, a lot of our targets, I think, are more of a January, more of a summer thing. I think the key thing at the moment is obviously the contracts, which we spoke about a little bit at the start, obviously, with Grace Clinton's year getting triggered as well, which I know there's a bit of concern about, but I'm not worried. I think we'll be fine. I was going to round the show off. Sporty's asked the question here: Do you have any fears we may see a managed decline buying us with the women's team? That's a really tough question to answer at the moment because how do I word this? If I'm being totally honest, I don't think they've had that much input. I think wording wise, obviously we all know what Sir Jim Ratcliffe has said. I don't think Ineos themselves I don't think that much has changed. If I'm being totally honest, behind the scenes, I don't think
managed decline is the term I would use because I don't think it would be. I don't think it would. That implies it's almost not intentional, but my concern is not that so much as just as drifting rather than managed decline. I would say is the term I would use instead.
Yeah, I think. It's like I said, it's a real tough one to answer at the moment because I think until, as Amy said, there's a permanent director of women's football there. Until that structure's in place, it's hard to. This is why I said earlier, there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. Don't get me wrong, the budget is there. I think this summer we'll have a big budget for the women's team and everything else, like in terms of transfers and so on. I'm not worried about that. I've said all along, for me, it's what you say to the players. For Dan Ashworth's faults, maybe he had many. I don't know the ins and outs there, but he was very pro women's team in terms of just being there, being a face on the ball, being someone that the women's team could go to and speak to and that was actually visible. That for me means a lot more than the number on a balance sheet. Actually being present and showing your face, I think, is a lot more. So that's what I would want in terms of moving forward, but it's hard to tell. Like I said,
I agree. I think there just needs to be some more personnel higher up who have a real kind of. Obviously, we'll see what happens with the head of women's football position going forward. I think what's important for me is seeing that there are those people appointed within the club, high up in the club, who are paying attention and are aware of what the women's team needs. I think money is obviously a factor, but Lord knows if there's anything we've learned from our men's side of the club, throwing money at a team does not necessarily always bring it success, right? For me, it's about the ethos that's around it and the team feeling supported so that we're an environment where players want to come to and want to stay. That's my major concern, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, and I feel like Sporty, obviously, this was obviously the backing up your question, but concerned that the funds for the women's team being filled out, sort the men's team out. If you haven't already, I'm going to shout out another channel. I don't usually do this, but they are good friends of ours, and we've got a lot of crossover with them now. But Stretford Paddock have done an interview with Kieran Maguire about the cost cutting and what Ineos are doing in terms of what the breakdown of that, in terms of what that means and how much impact that had. Honestly, the cost cutting has not made a dent in what we owe as a club, obviously debt wise. I say we didn't put it on us, but that's a whole other conversation. And I just don't think the women's team make a profit, or have done for a few years now. Cutting money away from the women's team is really not going to make any difference. So I don't even think they look at it, to be honest.
No, I think if you look at the money that is being spent on the women's team versus the men's team, I don't think our operating costs and budget would. This is my guess, as sort of a layman's fan's guess. I don't have any real expertise or insight. My guess is that would not really make a dent in the costs, and I would hope that. Although I take your point, because obviously a lot of the things that have been reported as cost-cutting measures don't seem like they would make much of a dent in the budget, like vouchers for staff, Christmas parties, stuff like that. My hope is that they would be PR savvy enough to know that taking funding away from your women's team directly to funnel into your men's team is a really bad look. Would be my hope, that it wouldn't go there. And I don't think it would make any sense financially or from a PR perspective. So that's not too much of a worry.
No, I 100% agree. I will just quickly correct myself, because I said obviously not impacting the women's team in truth, and Amy have rightly brought up obviously the foundation cuts and the impact on the academy and so on. There could be a knock-on effect there to, as Amy said, obviously the ECC and the PGA. It could. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not a finance person, so maybe that's a show we'll do. Maybe we'll get some financy person on to talk us through a little bit of this, because as I genuinely don't know, but it could have an impact there as well. What I was talking about was the women's team structure at the top. It shouldn't scratch the sides, and at the moment, from what I've heard, I don't think there's been that much change there. For me, to be totally honest, as I said, it's more just having the faces there. You know, there's a lot of staff that have moved on and or been let go, and some of them are back and reappearing. So I think it's a tough one. It really is. But we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see how the rest of the month.
I think you're right. It's about the team feeling supported and the fans feeling supported, I think, is the major thing. And I think it's probably fair to say that that's been missing at the moment. I don't think that's too harsh of a comment. Is that the fans definitely, I don't think, feel as positive about the direction of the club as perhaps we have done in the past. I think that should be the major concern, and that can come from money, but it can also come from cheaper things like just having faces around the training ground and paying like attention, basically.
No, 100%. We'll do a separate show on this, I think, so I feel like it deserves its whole own conversation. But yeah, as I said, busy month ahead. I'm sure we've obviously got a lot of games, ins and outs we've already had, to be fair. Ins, we might have a couple to talk about. Hopefully we do, because I love it. Last January was so I was waiting to do a player profile show. We could never do one because we didn't sign anyone. So I hope this window we do. Obviously in contracts, we'll keep an eye on all of that in terms of what happens there. We've seen one semi-extension with Grace's, yeah, we'll see what happens with the others. As I said, I'm not worried. I would expect a couple to start filtering through pretty soon on that one. But we'll round it off there, because we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes. Who would have thought West Brom? People would have clicked on this and gone West Brom preview. That's going to be a short one. We don't do short shows on here, especially with just two of us. We've run one on for an hour and 20 minutes.
Us doesn't make a difference because we can talk.
One of the things we said as a team last year, we're going to trim the shows down. We're going to make it shorter. Two of us on for an hour and 20 minutes. But
someone always makes a really good point in the comments. I'm like, I don't want to finish because someone's made a really good point that I want to come back to, but then I just end up talking for 20 minutes. And
it's been the first show of the year as well. We've not done one since the 30th of December. So we've got 10 days of news to catch up on. But we are obviously into the new year, as I said in the last show of last year. There'll obviously be some new things coming, some new shows and some new things as well. Some new ideas to get you guys involved in the chat a bit more and things like that, because we want to get you guys in terms of, the channel's called, the slogan of the channel is Be Heard for a reason. We want to get your guys' opinions on here more and really push that as well. So stay tuned for all of that, as there's some new shows, new ideas and new everything else as we move through it. Next show on here will likely be next Monday now, obviously, which will be the match reaction. Potentially got a couple of specials coming up as well, with a couple of things as well. Like, so we're trying to just branch out a little bit in terms of what we think you guys want to see based off your comments and things like that. So if you do have show ideas that you want to see us do and talk about as a sin tonight, whack it in the comments of this video. Obviously not in the live chat because that disappears after a while. I'm scrolling back to the live chat. In the comments of this video, let us know, because we want to do more things like this, and we want to do more things like this in terms of smaller panels and just having a little bit of a chat like we've done tonight, because I've really enjoyed this. And we move on. So yes, if you see us about Saturday, I think we're all there Saturday, believe it or not.
I am not in the stands though, so
that's a wave at Keris in the press box.
Yeah, give me a wave. I always spot Connor on the terrace. I always have a little look out. I'm like, oh yeah, there he is. So give me a wave.
You'll have to look the other way this time though, because we're not in North Stand. North Stand's not open this weekend.
Yeah.
So it'll be over in South for this one.
But
thanks.
Really bothered with that.
Thanks to everyone in the chat. Your comments have been amazing as we've gone through it all. Obviously, thanks to Tash earlier on for hopping on, and Keris as well. Have a good weekend. United are back. United women are back. It's good. We finally got something more to talk about as well. Make sure you're following all of our socials, All for United WFC. We're so close, by the way. We've been so close for ages to 10K on Twitter. So if you could drop the Twitter a follow, that would be amazing. Instagram as well. We're posting a lot more on there, and TikTok as usual. Have a good weekend all. Make sure you like this video and subscribing if you're new around here. We should see you guys in the next one.